We are exposed to biofilms in our everyday lives, whether we know it or not. They live on surfaces such as our kitchen, in our bathrooms, and even in our water pipes. They also live in and outside of our bodies, such as our teeth, our lungs, and our open wounds. Think of biofilms as a house that individual bacteria work to build and live in to protect themselves from foreign invaders, such as antibiotics. These biofilms are made up of many different components, most notably extracellular DNA and other biopolymers. However, these biofilms are a major clinical health threat with the ever-increasing chance of antimicrobial resistance. So let me give you one example of why they're a threat. Individuals with diabetic foot ulcers have a 60% chance of developing an infection. And of those, 60 to 80% of them might form a biofilm infection. And this can cause an array of other problems, such as limb amputation and even death. Current treatments, such as oral, topical, and systemic administration of antibiotics, are generally not effective against these biofilms. And that's because of this house that they have made. It can take up to 1,000 times greater the amount of antibiotic concentration to effectively eradicate these biofilms, again, risking antimicrobial resistance. Another gold standard is wound debridement, where the physician might physically cut out the infected wound, but this can cause a lot of pain to patients, as well as a good chance that the biofilm may return. So how can we implement a painless yet effective treatment for these biofilms? One such way is the use of microneedles. Microneedles are about the same size as the thickness of the credit card in your pocket, and theoretically, they're used to penetrate through that biofilm barrier, reaching deeper within to the cells to release antibiotics. So that brings me to my research. I work on developing microneedles for biofilm treatments. However, I found a gap in literature that I wanted to highlight in this talk. I found that as traditional microneedles, they were originally used to replace regular needles and syringes by bypassing the first layer of your skin and delivering drugs inside your body. These microneedles have been extensively studied for their many different formulations and materials at penetrating healthy skin. But on the other hand, biofilms have also shown to break down host human tissue, theoretically changing the structural mechanics and the structural integrity of the host human skin. So, in other words, I want to be able to understand the impact that biofilm has on the skin's structural integrity to be able to develop these microneedles. So to address this gap, I study the mechanics of pig tissue that has biofilm covered on it. And to do this, I use a device that's either flat or has a singular microneedle on it. And it will press down onto the skin, and it will give a measurement that the skin will give back to the device. So to understand the biofilm's impact on the skin's integrity, I focused on three key factors: what we see through visual inspection, what we feel through stiffness measurement with the flat device, and how it resists puncture using the microneedle device. And so first, using visual inspection, I noticed that as the biofilm grew bigger and stronger, the surface underneath started to weaken, almost like a foundation started to crumble under an expanding structure. Next, through stiffness measurement with the flat device, I noticed that at day 1, my control and biofilm-covered skin both had the same stiffness, almost like two structures made out of the same material. But then at day 2, I noticed that the biofilm-covered skin had decreased in stiffness, almost like it had started to absorb moisture and warp. But at day 3, I noticed that the stiffness had returned, almost like the structure had restabilized itself again. So this was my first clue that the biofilms were actively reshaping their environment on top of the skin. Finally, looking at the microneedles, I noticed that over time, they started to slip through without any sort of resistance. And I had two hypotheses for why this was happening. First is that the surface underneath started to weaken so much that it would collapse under any sort of microneedle pressure. And the second is that the biofilm had become so flexible that it absorbed the force, bending instead of breaking. So all this matters because if we want to break through the biofilm barrier using microneedles, we need to understand the biofilm's impact on skin structural integrity first. Just like you wouldn't take down a rubbery bouncing house with a hammer, we need to make microneedles specifically for biofilm treatments. Microneedles might be small, but they might be the key to breaking through the biofilm barrier and restoring healthy skin. Thank you.